One. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in for our interview. Today, we'll be talking about Red, White, and Whole with special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Rajani LaRocca, and I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to jump right into it. And Veer will start by asking our first question of the night.
Okay. So I was gonna start off by saying, when did you realize that you wanted to be a writer?
Oh, that's an interesting question because I think it depends. So I was one of those kids that loved books for like a very long time, like from when I was really little, and I did a lot of creative writing in, elementary school and middle school and high school. But I also knew from a pretty young age that I wanted to go into medicine. Um, I didn't think you could be both. So I was just like, I'm just going to go into medicine. I was in a high school creative writing class and I was having a ball. And I said to my teacher, I said, well, this is great, but like, this is not what I'm going to do for my career. And he said to me, who says you have to choose? And then he brought in all these books that were written by authors who happened to be doctors. So that kind of planted a seed. But then and then I went to college and then I went to medical school and residency and then I had little kids and like there was no writing happening during that time. And it was about 10 years ago that I decided to go back to something creative. And I started just taking some online classes. And then I kind of caught the bug when I took in-person classes and I met other writers and we formed critique groups. I was like, oh, I should keep doing this. So yeah, about 10 years ago. And then I would say maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago was when I was like, I think I want to try and write something that would be published as opposed to just for myself.
That's cool.
Okay, I have the next question. It's what was the process of creating the cover like? I'm not sure if you did it but did you have like an envisioning of what you wanted it to be like?
Of the cover of Red, White, and Whole? Okay, so let me just show you this cover. This cover is just amazing. Okay, I can say that because I didn't do anything for this cover. So what happens typically when a publisher acquires your book and they start thinking about ideas for covers, sometimes I was very lucky in that they asked me about covers that I like. They were like, what are your ideas? And I was like, I'm not an illustrator. I know nothing about anything. But I said, I do prefer for middle grade, especially, I do prefer illustrated over photographic. And then I showed them, I made like a dream board of like all kinds of covers that I loved. And then I said, I don't know, it's a novel in verse. And here are some of the themes. It's like red blood cells and stars and moon. And like, I don't know, like, what can you do with that? And they came up with this. They did this, they showed me the sketch and I nearly lost my mind. So for anybody who's read the book, so these are all flower petals, right? And as they rise, they float up to become red and white blood cells that then rise further, that becomes stars in the sky. And the main character's name is Reha, and her name means star. And her mother's name is Poonam, which means full moon. And they put all of that on the cover. And the cover managed to be a poem in and of itself. So I'm just so amazed. And the artist is Rinda Zaveri, who I believe is Indian American. She lives in California. And Aaron Fitzsimmons is the book designer who came up with these genius ideas. Great question.
Oh, if you don't mind me asking, where are you located?
I'm outside of Boston.
Oh.
Where it's sunny, but not quite as warm as where it is where you are.
Okay, so I have the next question. So I know that Red, White, and Whole is a book that many people, like many immigrants, can relate to with the experiences of, trying to adapt to a whole different country and its different cultures. So, in what ways does Red, White, and Whole reflect your own experiences?
Oh, that's a great question too. So, what I will say is that even when I write fiction, and this is a fictional story for sure, I try to convey true emotion. And I have to say, of any book that I've ever written, this book takes pieces of my life, like big pieces of my life that things that I actually felt, and puts them on a page. So, Reha starts the book by saying that she lives, she has two lives, right? One that's Indian and one that is not. And she feels torn between kind of like her parents and their immigrant community and kind of what they do and how they act and what they expect of her. And then like her life at school when she's like with all her friends and like she's listening to pop music and wants to watch, music videos and stuff like that. And but with the understanding that she loves both of these worlds, right? She loves her parents, she respects them, she loves her community, she loves her friends at school. And she, in a way, she does fit into both of them, but in a way she feels separate from both of them. So I as a kid, I lived that life, right? Where you like hung out all week with your friends, and then like every weekend you were with your parents and like with all the people you saw on the weekends. And part of my brain was like, well, which one is the real life? I was like, I can't tell. And so I definitely felt that as a kid. And Reha also knows she wants to be a doctor early on in her life, much as I did. And although her story is a little bit different. So I actually read a book that really got me interested. Ooh, I have it here. Hold on a second. This is from like 1977. But this book totally got me interested in in medicine and becoming a doctor. And it basically talks about like all these things that happen to you when you get like little hurts. And there's like all these things about like what happens when blood vessels rupture and stuff like that. And I read that book when I was a little kid and I was like, isn't that cool? That's like so awesome that you don't have to think about any of that stuff and it just kind of happens. And I was like, I think I want to just keep doing that and thinking about that stuff. But Reha has a problem that I did not have. Reha is afraid of blood, like she faints at the sight of blood, and that is definitely not something that I ever did. Thank goodness, because it would be hard to overcome that. Also, like Reha, so my mom didn't have cancer, but she was injured in a car accident when I was a teenager, and she was in the hospital for a long time. And I remember distinctly feeling, wait a minute, like I say that I want to be a doctor, but like every time I walk into the hospital, I feel like I'm going to be like, I can't stand being there anymore. So like, is that something I still want to do? And luckily, my mom got better and I ended up deciding to go into medicine, and it ended up working out. But yeah, all those things are taken, those feelings are straight from my own life, including so the feeling of two worlds between like your community and your school, and also the two worlds between like being in the hospital and out of the hospital. And I will just tell you that all the songs that are mentioned in this book are like among my favorites from that year, from 1983 and 1984. So the music was huge at that point, and that was a big part of my life growing up. Yeah, and I think so. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities between Reha's life and mine. Thank you.
That's really cool to hear about. I know you mentioned that you're an Indian American author as well, and we don't often see many of those in the publishing industry. So I guess my question would feed off of that as to why do you think it's important to include like your personal heritage and your personal experiences in your writing?
Yeah. So as that kid who loved books, like who loved every book and like wanted to, basically had a book in her hand all the time. So growing up here, I never saw my experience reflected in a book as a kid. And then I would go to India and visit relatives, and I didn't see my experience reflected there either, because the stories that I read in India were all about people in India, right? And so, despite that, I loved all the books that I read. I empathized with the characters, like I really enjoyed them. But honestly, it wasn't until I was an adult that I read a book that reflected my experience. And it was kind of like earth shattering, right? It was mind blowing. And I was like, wow. I was like, that is an incredible feeling, to feel like you've been seen and to feel like your story matters. So when it came time to start writing, I think we all, to a certain extent, write from our own experience, things that we care about and love. But I'm just delighted to be able to write books about characters that were like me, to write the books that I would have loved to read when I was that age.
So, did you ever run into any problems while trying to get your book published?
Oh, okay. So the short answer is yes, of course. So, it can take a long time. So Red, White, and Whole is my second novel published. It's my third book published. But um, it took me a long time of writing and revising in order to kind of get here. So, in order to be traditionally published in the US, in order to even send your stories to publishers, you have to have a literary agent. So that's like an entire process of its own where you like send them what's called a query letter, which is like basically an email saying this is what my book is about. And then you send them a few pages of the book. And if they like what they see, then they ask for the whole thing and then they read it. And then God knows how long it takes before they get back to you. And then eventually one of them hopefully will say yes. And then once you have the agent, then you can send your book to publishers. And that's its own thing. The agent writes an email and, says what the book is about and attaches the manuscript and talks about you. And then that can take months too. So I would say that in maybe 2013 is when I first thought I would like to be published. And then in 2017, like the end of 2017 is when I got my agent. And then in 2018, we sold the first book. So it can take a long time. But the good news with novels is that weirdly, they can come out much faster than picture books. I also write picture books. Picture books, because I'm not an illustrator, as I've already mentioned, you have to find an illustrator. That there's a whole process that goes through. So picture books take a minimum of 2 years and sometimes longer. But my novels have all come out the year after we sold them. So it can be pretty fast. But yes, you get a lot of no's. I got a lot of agent no's. I got a lot of editor no's. I just, you have to just keep going. And as someone who's been relatively successful in my life, like I went to college and I went to medical school and like I got a job and I got a husband and some children. I've been relatively successful. I've never heard no this many times in my life, but it is worth it and it keeps you humble.
So I love to read as well, and I know this can be a hard question, but do you have a favorite book?
Oh man. Okay. Um so for adult books, I would say I loved All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, and then The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri. That book is mind blowing. That book is amazing. So hold on, I just want to make sure that my husband is leaving the garage and sometimes my AirPods like connect to the car. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen. So if you don't hear me for a while, that's why. But the other, like for kids books, when I was a kid, my favorite book was The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin, which I think won the Newbery Medal in 1979. It's like a mystery book with like it's a rich old man who dies under mysterious circumstances, and then all his heirs are called together. And basically the upshot at the reading of the will is whoever figures out what happens to me gets all the money. And like there's this girl named Turtle Wexler who's just awesome, and she's very spunky and smart. So I loved books about smart kids solving puzzles, and I think that's why I sometimes write books about smart kids solving puzzles.
Okay, so what was one of the most surprising things you learned in creating your books?
Okay, I think one of the things that is so surprising is the number of people it takes to publish a book. So, and so first of all, it starts with like me and my critique partners. If I didn't have critique partners, I don't think I could do any of this. Then like there's an agent, there's an editor, then there's all the people at the publisher, right? There are like multiple types of editors. There's like your editor, there's a copy editor, there's like all these other people. And then there's like, the people that make the cover and, the book designer, and then there's like sales and marketing. Like it's just a lot of people, It's very interesting. So like when a publisher decides to buy a book, there's like a whole committee of people that has to meet and agree that they should buy this book. It's very interesting. I guess one of the other surprising things is, it was surprising in the beginning how many times you have to revise something before it gets to be the thing that you want it to be. So, I'm sorry, all of you students. It really does take a lot of revision. But the good thing is that nowadays I love revising. Nowadays, the hardest part for me is writing a first draft, because the draft is always going to be terrible. And you have to just live with that and just be like, it's not going to be as good as the final thing. But then the revision part is really fun, because there's something that already exists and you can change it. And then I will not be too long-winded, but the third thing that I would say that was surprising to me is that people wanted to read my stories, like my stories about kids who are like me, or, like my own weird like quirks, like Midsummer's Mayhem, which was my debut novel, is about a girl who likes to bake, and it's basically A Midsummer Night's Dream meets Cupcake Wars. And I'm like, okay, that's weird, but apparently some people want to read about that. But yeah, I was surprised. And then the last thing I will say is that when I first started writing, like when I first started taking classes, I was afraid that I would run out of ideas. But then I think you find the more that you write, the more that you're like, oh, I have too many ideas and I won't have enough time in my life to write them all. So I got to pick ones that I really, really love. But that's kind of cool. That's kind of a cool surprise.
Okay, well, I guess to close off, I'll ask one more question. But out of all the books you've written, which one was either the most challenging or your favorite one to write? And it could be like a picture book or a novel.
Okay, I'm not going to say which one is my favorite, because I can't choose a favorite. It's like saying choose a favorite child. That's just, whatever. But I will say that so Red, White, and Whole was the one that like poured out of me, like it was a book that existed somewhere else, and like it chose me to write it. I thought of this idea in like February of 2019, and then I was working on another book, and like I wouldn't allow myself to work on this one. So I would just like think about it, and didn't really write anything, just thought about it for like months. And then in December, when I turned that other book in, it like poured out of me in like 6 weeks, which is like shocking. So I will say that that was an amazing experience. I don't know if I will ever have that experience again of writing a book that quickly, and that like I knew what it was about, and like it just kind of happened. I also have a picture book coming in August called Where Three Oceans Meet. And it's a story about a girl who goes with her mother and grandmother to Kanyakumari, which is at the tip of India. And it's like a road trip book. But like in it, she like kind of learns about like all the things that mothers and daughters share. And it is like, it's just one of my favorite books. I just love, I love that story. And I just can't. And the artist, the illustrator is an artist named Archana Srinivasan, and she lives in Bangalore, India, which is where my whole family is from. And she got it. Like she knew what the grandmother should look like, and she brought her own spin to it. I think she made the grandmother in the story look like her own grandmother. Like it's just, there are all these little tiny details in the book that she put in that are just like wonderful. So I can't wait for that one to come out.
That sounds amazing. Well, I think that's all the time we have today. And yeah, thank you so, so much for joining us. I think we all learned so much from your experiences and from your thoughts and advice and everything. So I'm really excited that you could join us today. And thank you to everyone who's tuning in.
Thank you for having me. I had a wonderful time. What a great set of questions.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.